afternoon, YouTube, and welcome back once again to Fat Cat Collection. Today, guys, if you haven't, you've probably already seen already, the topic of today's video, and that's Android car stereos, more specifically the Tesla-style Android deck. So I just want to do kind of a quick discussion and kind of make a just kind of a good-to-know video and what to expect video. I like to do these because a lot of times, unless we give these products a chance, you know, I can review products all day long and tell you guys about the specs and you know, what I think about it right off the bat, but ultimately, what I really like is when a company reaches out and says, hey, you know, we want to send you something, right? And not always do I review products that get sent to me. You know, a lot of times I buy stuff and I share it with you guys, right? Like my Master Built Smoker video or like my Microwave Fix video. So it really just kind of depends. But one thing I usually don't do is like review something and then send it back. Like a watch, I'll never get it and then send it to another reviewer or something like that. Because I feel like you have to really own it and get to use it and enjoy it to really know some of the good and bad with the products. Now, today we're not going to be talking about watches. Of course, this is about an Android deck. And mainly any Android stereo that you're going to find off eBay or Amazon, DHgate, AliExpress, places like that. Now, I have a couple of these. I have one. They're both very similar. They're more of the portrait style, Tesla style decks. One in my Solar and then one in my Honda. They're very similar, slightly different. Specs are pretty close. I've had other brands that were more of the standard, you know, landscape mode. I've had other brands by Power Acoustic. And there's just a couple things I want you guys to consider if you're going to be buying one of these. Now, this video is going to be linked to my primary video, one of my most popular videos, and that is on one of the Android decks I put in my Solara. And just a couple things to really kind of keep in mind. So, when you're buying something that's going to be just, you know, an aftermarket deck, generally, when you change anything from stock, and this is really, and I get a lot of questions on this deck, hey, will it fit my... Guys, I don't know every single vehicle whether or not these decks are going to fit yours. I understand, I say in every video, ask me a question, you know, but when you buy a double DIN deck, that's going to fit a double DIN opening. A double DIN is the wider one, okay? Single DIN's your old school standard style size. Double DIN is this larger one. Double DIN's what they went with kind of after the single DIN, of course, on newer cars back around 2000-ish. And nowadays, really, to change out anything in the car, it's a lot more involved depending on which car you have, right? If you're going to get a luxury car, good luck. You're not going to, I mean, you're going to have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to have something custom done. And to be honest with you, a lot of times you don't have to really do that, you know? For most people, and I get, you know, comments all the time when it comes to stereo stuff, you know? Oh, you need to go with this brand, or this brand, this Sony sucks, or... Guys, all these brands are pretty good. And just like when I talk about Invicta Watches, you know, there's always going to be the guys who think you have to spend thousands of dollars on an amplifier or a head unit to get quality. Quality is subjective. Everybody has a different idea on quality, right? And what they're looking to get. For me, I'm looking, when I do a stereo up, I want it to sound good, right? But I'm not overly critical. I want it to sound good, not have any kind of engine noise or any kind of unwanted noise, which is indication that you've done something wrong, right? You've installed something incorrectly. I don't want that, of course, and I want the bass, right? But most of the time when I'm listening to something, when I say bass, I don't want like 110 and just have some backfill, right? I want it to really blow my ears out. But I generally don't listen to it like that all the time. There are sometimes generally rap music when I want to crank it up summertime with the windows down and really, you know, let that bass just kind of shake my head apart. You know, those are the times where I really crank it up. Most of the time, though, I just listen to it at a normal level, and I kind of tone the bass down and just have it sound the way it's supposed to sound when you listen to music. Not overpowering, but balanced, right? Now, this isn't really about, again, system design or any of that kind of stuff. That's a totally different discussion. What this is about is when you go getting an aftermarket deck. If you are somebody who's going to go and get an aftermarket deck and you don't have to like add a high level to low level converter to keep your factory stuff. This is for a double DIN Android deck, and we could say single DIN as well because they do make the larger screen size ones that are meant to fit in a single DIN opening. In order for that to fit, your vehicle has to either have an old school double DIN or single DIN opening. There is no other question I can answer for you. And even there are some cases where you still might need to bypass factory amplification. If you have a basic stereo that's either a single DIN or a double DIN, and you want to get an aftermarket Android deck, and really any aftermarket deck, and you're going to use deck power, these decks will work in your car. Ultimately, when you're going to look into putting a deck in your car, you need to just, if you don't have the experience to figure it out yourself, you really just need to hire a professional car audio installation place and pick their brain. Ask them what's going to fit, ask them how easy it's going to be. You know, and that doesn't necessarily mean you have to go with them, it just means that you'll get some information. Now, if you are going to go with a reputable brand, generally when people change out the deck in their vehicle, usually there's a couple reasons why they do that. One, if they're not really looking to have any kind of extra sound, and have it be louder or more bassy, whatever, you know, why most people change out their stereos. Generally, people will want to have just a couple extra features. They may want Bluetooth, they may want a USB stick, they may want the ability to be able to play DVDs, those kinds of things. You know, for me, my most important aspect when changing out any of my decks over the years has really been to be the ability to play music digitally off a USB card or USB stick. That's really it. You know, it's cool that it plays movies. It's cool that, you know, a lot of these Android decks have all the apps. But what I found with these Android decks is that they, as cool as they are, as great as the price is on these things, they do have their flaws, right? And I really hope someday that somebody will come out with a deck that is powered by some of the chips you can find in the phones. You know, if my Android decks that I have worked as flawlessly as my phone does, I would never have anything to say negative about it. What I find is that they're kind of glitchy, right? And one of my biggest pet peeves with the decks is that when you go, and I haven't messed around with different launchers or any of that stuff, even decks that have, you know, quad-core processor and plenty of RAM, plenty of memory, they just are a little glitchy. They just don't act like your a reputable cell phone acts, right? Or a reputable tablet, you know? You go get a Fire Tab, they almost kind of act like an older Fire Tab where, you know, the touch screen isn't as sensitive as your phone, right? You might have to press things a few times. What I found is apps, when it comes to music apps, generally they'll have the same kind of operating system on there, the Android, but it's a different version of Android. Now, if you have the skill set, you can change all this stuff around. But I'm just saying for the guy who's going to take this out of the box and use it, download a few apps right from Google Play, this is what you're going to have to kind of deal with. For instance, the music app. You can't delete the music app on a lot of these and then use your own app and have that be the default app. Generally, the music app doesn't go away. So you can still add a second app to that, but it's not going to be your default app. So what you'll have to do is basically just open the second app, play your music. What I found is that the apps that you download, whatever music app that you download, it doesn't want to run it as smoothly as the one that comes on it. Now, I think in time, as they start using better processors and making these things just a little better, and I'm sure there's other companies out there that make better versions, it's just you don't know until you try it with all this Amazon stuff, you know, a lot of these other brands. And, you know, it's okay because you're not paying a lot for them, but it is just to be noted that you are going to have a little bit of, you're going to have kind of a glitchy deck, right? What else? For instance, a lot of these units, for a guy who's looking to add amplifiers, only have one RCA preamp output, right? There's no sub-control. Now, again, a guy who has the ability to go in there and change things around with the menu and make changes, I'm talking about the average guy, and I'm not average when it comes to car stereos, but when it comes to that stuff, like, I don't know how to alter the menu and do all that stuff. So you're going to be stuck to one RCA out. So that's okay because you can split the RCA signal, and despite what other people tell you, you can do that without losing signal. You're not going to have any problems. The real issue with these decks is that the voltage coming out of these decks is extremely low. So I do encourage you, if you are going to add one of these things to your car, make sure you add a line driver at the same time. You can find I added one of the line drivers, made a big difference to my system in my Solari. It was an audio pipe. It's a single in, like 3 out amplified 10 volt line driver. Now, again, my amp that I have running to it, I don't think the sensitivity is designed to run with a 10 volt line driver. It was just something I kind of picked. There's not a lot of options out there. And, you know, to be honest with you, it sounds great and I have no issues with it, but it did make a big difference. My Honda is another example of a deck that I should have did that when I put that stereo in. This summer I'm going to get a different line driver. Now, there's not a lot of options. You can find a lot of EQs that have built-in line drivers. And basically what a line driver is going to do is it's going to up the voltage of the signal from the deck to, let's just say, I'm sure it's not even a volt with these decks. Usually aftermarket decks, inexpensive, reputable decks, have a 2 volt pre-out, and usually on the sub-output they have a 4. That's optimum, right? However, I found that 2 volt works great, but I do feel with these decks that they don't even have a 2 volt out. So I think you should add a line driver of some sorts. Audio control makes an LC1. I reached out to them to see if I can get my hands on one, and that'll allow you to turn up the voltage of that output or that RCA signal, and it actually has a Some people complain about the audio control being too expensive, that they're really just kind of repackaging things you can get from AliExpress. I don't know about all that. All I know is that they make it really easy to basically just put your input right into one of their, say this particular device, and then you basically turn up the gain, and once you see the clip light or the distortion light kick on, you back it off. So you're tuning this thing to get maximum output power. Now technically when you're running this stuff, you should actually use an oscilloscope. Steve Mead, I haven't got one yet. They make I think it's a DD1, it's a distortion detector, and it's a really easy way to set your gains. You basically just plug all your components, you run down the line, you turn your deck up to a certain point playing a track that they give you, and it allows you to adjust the maximum volume of your deck, because your deck may go to 30, but you don't know where that deck actually distorts. Unfortunately, even reputable name brand companies, who've been in the car audio business for a long time, don't give you, hey, our deck distorts here guarantee. You pretty much have to test each deck individually. Now, I usually just do it by ear. It's not the best way of doing it. Some guys will argue that that is the best way of doing it, but for me, what I find is with digital music, they're all recorded different, and unless you rip every one of your own CDs and you're digitally ripping everything or cataloging everything where it's in the same bit rate, the same music files, it's very difficult to, that's the thing about CDs. Generally, for the most part, when you put a CD in, most of them are pretty much very similar, right? So you tune your system, you're using CDs, you're probably tuned correctly with whatever you're going to put in it, with a grain of salt, right? With digital content, it's totally different. So you may stream your phone, it's going to have a different output than a USB. A USB recorded at different bit rate. It's all going to be different. So you just kind of do the best you can for your ear. I'm constantly messing with mine because I'll tune it one day in the driveway, sitting there, I'll be like, all right, I got it tuned in now. And then I'll go down the road, play a different track, and I'm like, all right, now I have to turn it up too loud. I'm hitting that deck distortion point. So the DD1 is a really nice way of saying, hey, of being able to tune this stuff. What I recommend doing is when you're going to tune your system, and this is, again, in my opinion, is I like to generally tune it with a song that's pretty quiet, that I know is like, all right, I'm going to want this louder when I'm driving, and this, this isn't going to, I need to tune this up a little bit. And then other songs I put in will generally have, it'll be a lot louder. I just can't keep the volume down a little bit, right? But there's nothing worse than having to go into that distortion level. Maybe you didn't turn your amp up high enough or match the gains appropriately with that particular song. So technically it's not the right way of doing it, but I know the right way of technically doing it is you tune everything to a test CD. But in my experience with car audio, it's, I'm not trying to win any car stereo competitions. I'm not trying to win any audio quality competitions. My experience of car audio is that if you do it that way, you're going to find a track that you're turning up past your threshold because you want to hear it louder. And it just never, it's not really a set rule. And that's why it's nice to have a bass knob. And the bass knob, so you guys know, is not a volume control. It is a gain knob in most amps. And technically, when you're messing with that, you're messing with the sensitivity of the amp. It's not really the correct way of doing it. Technically, when you set your gains, you're supposed to just set them and that's the end of it. You're not supposed to be messing with them on the fly, but because the way things are recorded, we're constantly changing things around. So again, with me, I just try to set it the best I can to try to get the maximum output without a lot of distortion. A lot of times, tuning stuff, I will tune something at a certain song, and I'm like, all right, that sounds great. I back down the highs a little bit or the mid-range because I don't want it to be over, ear-piercing, but I want that bass to be ear-piercing, and then I have to go back and fix it. So ultimately, the point of this conversation is you're going to have to really mess with it to get it really dialed in, and then you still may have to mess with it. So, but with that being said, you are going to be a little bit disappointed if you don't up the voltage of those RCA outputs getting one of these Android decks. Trust me, I've tested several of them, and every single time I've had to add a line driver. So I'll be adding a line driver pretty soon this summer with the Honda. The Jaguar, I have an audio control LC2, and that one's a little different. I'm actually running a high level to low level converter with a couple different devices, but the Solara, I got that audio pipeline driver. I'm hoping to add in the Honda or switch them around the LC, I think it's the LC1i. Anyway, so get a line driver, any line driver. Just get something if you're going to get an aftermarket Android deck. The other thing to think about too with these things is not just, again, that it's going to be a little bit glitchy when it comes to, your touch screen. And I'm not saying so bad where you're like, I got to get rid of this, but it's not going to be as smooth as your phone. I've never found one yet. Now, it doesn't mean one doesn't exist, but my experience with the ones I reviewed, Benny Z, some of the other Android, you get to go to my playlist and check them out. These are kind of things that I've noticed. The other thing is that, you know, when you start to put all these different apps on them, I find that they just, like, if you want to run YouTube on them, you can run it, but apps crash a lot. It just seems like they just don't have things dialed in to really make the devices run like a good tablet. You know, they just haven't got there yet, and I hope that someday down the road they do. It just, if you've ever had like a really off-brand, no-name tablet that was like a dual core, that's kind of my experience with these things, you know. Now there is a new company that I mentioned the other day, Benny Z. They don't have the landscape version. They sent me the widescreen. I'll tell you, the touch screen is a lot more sensitive on that one there, but I want the landscape mode in both of my cars. So I'm hoping maybe, you know, down the road, maybe change something out, but if it bothers me enough, I'll just switch out to the 10-inch Benny Z I got. I hooked that up to the in my garage, and it definitely is a lot smoother, you know. I'd have to double check and see. I'm pretty sure all the decks I have are quad core, but I could be wrong in that. So we'll see. What else? So the other thing to think about too is, again, a lot of these decks, this to be said with not just Android decks, but any deck, is the issue that I have with a lot of these companies is that if you're going to, let's say you don't even want an Android deck, you're going to go on Amazon, try to find a brand. I found that all these big giant screens, they limit to the amount of characters that can be put out for the music. So I've had one by Power Acoustic. Again, you have a big giant 10-inch screen, and they're limiting it to, like, you know, 8 characters for the song. So if you've labeled your songs like, okay, you know, let's say you labeled your song like Bon Jovi, Living on a Prayer, right? And then Bon Jovi, let's say you've labeled the songs as having the artist name in front of the song. Let's say you have your folder Bon Jovi, then you have your album Bon Jovi New Jersey, and then your songs. So everybody labels things differently. Some of the audio I have, it's labeled like Bon Jovi, the name, and then of course the song title. You don't actually see the song title. You just end up seeing Bon Jovi, and you don't know what song you're actually on. A lot of these guys, I don't really understand it. It's just, I've seen it with a lot of different decks. So, you know, their music app it's just designed that way. You don't get the full track information. So it's a real huge pet peeve of mine, because the whole point of having the big screen is so I can see all the information. And depending on what brand you go with, that might be an issue. I'll tell you that the Android decks are a little bit better than a lot of the reputable name brand decks. I find, again, my Power Acoustic deck was a perfect example of a big giant screen. Ran great with their own operating system. It was an Android, but you know, you didn't have all the information. So it was just, what's the point of the big giant screen if you're getting this much text and then just a big graphic they decide to put on there that you can't change? You couldn't see the folders, nothing. Now, again, with the Android decks, you can select whatever music app you want, but again, I've tried a lot of different music apps, and they all just run really glitchy. A lot of times, too, when you go to put a USB stick into the deck, right? You would assume, just like with anything else, your computer or anything, you pop a USB stick in there, and you know, you'll see the tracks. There's been times where I'll pop that USB track in there, and it takes, like, you know, a couple rotations of the key to get the deck to actually, I guess, catalog, if I'm using the right terminology for it, those songs. So there's times where I'll put in new music on my USB, and I'll have to wait a couple days before I even see it pop up. And again, I'll power cycle the deck, I'll reboot it, and it still doesn't show up. Other times with some of the other apps as well, I can't even get it to pull the data from the USB. It wants to pull the data from the actual onboard memory, right? So again, just so you guys know, I'm not an expert at this stuff, but just these are some of the things you might have to deal with when it comes to getting some of these Android decks. They're definitely not as refined as a good quality tablet, and hopefully someday they'll improve to the point where they really just put a bone stock Android operating system on it that's clean and simple. I've always said, when you look at like Android sticks and some of the Android boxes you get for your TV at home, one of the best ones that's super lean is the NVIDIA Shield. You get it and it's raw, and anything you put on it is your decision. It runs smooth, there's no choppiness to it, and I hope that one of these companies will actually just put a raw operating system and let you choose your own launcher without, let you delete what apps you don't want. Just put the basics on it, and they just never do that. I don't really care about Apple AirPlay. I don't use Apple. I don't care about screen mirroring. What I want is music, maybe the occasional concert, and Bluetooth calling. You know, that's it. I want all those three things to really work flawlessly. So just kind of keep that in mind. I wanted to put the video out there just to see if anybody's in the market for one of the Android decks I've reviewed. Just a couple things to be aware of, so you're not, you know, having to rip your stereo apart constantly to, you know, fix something. Just know that, you know, these decks are not going to sound as good as, you know, as any of your reputable brand decks, even your inexpensive Sony or Nakamichi Walmart Special. You know, in my opinion, is going to be a lot less glitchy than one of these. You know, they are what they are, you know, and I'm not saying I regret getting the decks because they look really cool in the car. Again, the menu feature with some of the apps I use, I forget which music app I tend to use. You know, there's just like other little glitchy things, like they'll have the back button, right? And on certain apps, like the back button that you would think, all right, that takes me back, it exits you right out of the app. So just little things that just aren't really well thought out with these decks that are really kind of annoying. And you're just gonna have to kind of live with if you get something like that. But don't expect, if you're getting an Android deck, to get something that's gonna be like really, you know, snappy and quick and fast and really refined like your tablet, because I've yet to find one. And again, like I said, I haven't reviewed a lot of them, but the ones I have reviewed are generally, like when you go to Amazon, you click one of my links to those decks. Generally, if you buy it through my link, you're really buying. If you don't buy that from that exact seller, there's a good chance if you see a deck like I have and it's like a no-name brand, even though the companies will have different seller names. Generally speaking, you know, those decks are all the same, being sold from many different people with many different sellers' names. So if you get it from one, the chances are, if you're like, this isn't for me, I don't like it, that getting it from another seller under another company name isn't going to be any different. So just kind of keep that in mind. So if I can help you in any way, let me know. I'm here to answer any questions as always, guys. And that's just my 2 cents on Android decks. Doesn't mean I don't use them. Doesn't mean I won't continue to use them. They don't cause me enough of a headache to warrant going back to just a standard, you know, brand name double DIN. But I will always keep you guys in the loop as far as what I do. So anyway, thanks for watching. Have a good weekend and take care.